This is the Humans of Gaming podcast, an open and honest conversation about games, life, and belief.
Hey, this is Drew Dixon from Love Thy Nerd. You're listening to Humans of Gaming. I'm joined as always by my co-host. I had to think about what you were. Chris Gwaltney. Hey, Chris.
Did you want to say like cohort or
Cohort, co-conspirator,
yeah,
co-person,
co-bro?
co-bro. That's awful. Yeah.
Hey, I'm Chris. I'm the chief executive nerd for Love Thy Nerd and cohort of Drew for this podcast.
That's right. We have a very special guest today, and that's Karen Schrier. Did I say that right? I could have asked you.
You did. It was awesome.
All right.
Drew is notoriously he's confident, he goes for it in pronouncing people's names, but sometimes it's a miss. So I'm happy for you, Drew. You did it.
Thanks, man. It means a lot. So you're a professor of, you investigate games. You study them, I guess. How would you describe what you do? You do a lot of things, and you've written a lot on the subjects of games and play and understanding games. Yeah. How do you introduce yourself in the work that you do?
Oh, wow. I guess I would say that I am a designer, a researcher, and an educator. So all things games, everything from designing games to understanding the social impact of games to researching how games might support our understanding of humanity.
Yeah.
Not much. Just not much.
I like to make stuff, but I also like to teach others how to make stuff. And then I also like to write about people making things. So I like all different kinds of things, which is kind of what's awesome about being a professor.
Yeah. So you're an associate professor of games and interactive media at Marist College. Is that right?
Yes. So I am the associate professor and director of games there. It's a small liberal arts college about 2 hours north of New York City.
Okay. Great. And you've written some books about game design and the value and the importance of play, I believe, right? And edited some books, Ethics in Game Design and Learning and Education in Games are two of those books, correct?
Yeah, so I have edited a book series called Learning, Education, and Games that is a collection of all different articles on everything from how to design games to how to use games in the classroom. Actually, we're coming out with a brand new book, which is going to be 100 games to use in the classroom and beyond. And it's 100 different games where there's 100 different chapters on all different games, everything from, you name it, Fortnite to much more specifically educational games. Yeah. But we've got Minecraft, we've got, your kind of favorite commercial games as well in there. And that's going to probably be out this summer. I'm also working on another book right now that I'm authoring myself, which is using games to teach ethics and civics.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
Which is super exciting.
So
yeah.
My question is, do you sleep?
You know what?
Because that's a lot. You got a lot going on.
I really didn't sleep, but lately I've been sleeping. It's kind of strange, actually, because I went from being this night owl where I would be up until almost 5 a.m. every morning working and writing and doing all these things. And I was like that my whole life. And then last year, everything changed suddenly. And now I can't stay up past 11 p.m. So I don't know what happened, but now I sleep.
Well, because you were telling us you have kids too. So did that change when you had kids? Because you said you had was it 7 and 4-year-old?
No. Yeah, I do. I do have kids and they don't sleep. But actually, in the last year, they've started finally to sleep.
That's
and I have too, which is nice. Yeah. But before that, they really didn't sleep at all. So I really didn't sleep for a good 6 years straight. Yeah, those were fun 6 years. It's interesting. How did I survive on so little sleep? Most of it was just that I didn't, it's one of those things where you just don't know what you're doing. Half of the time. You're just kind of sleepwalking through life. And that was me.
Yeah, I don't like to sleep, really. It's hard for me. I don't sleep well, and then I don't spend a lot of time sleeping either. And I don't know like what that's doing to my body. It's probably not good, but
No, you'll be fine.
I feel pretty alert. I feel like I don't feel like I'm sleepwalking through life, but
Yeah.
but I
Well, I didn't realize how different life is when you actually sleep.
mm,
Because I hadn't slept my whole life, really. So all of a sudden in the last year, just like not feeling just completely awful all the time.
yeah.
Weird.
It's been really nice.
And you don't know what clicked. Like it just kind of happened.
Yeah, it's so weird. I don't know either. It just something changed. Maybe I entered my 40s or something. I don't know. I became an old person, and now I actually like
You're gonna
sleeping. Maybe that's the
start
difference.
eating dinner
Before
at
I
4
did not
p.m.
like sleeping, and now I like sleeping. So.
Well,
Well, good. Well,
there's hope for you yet, Drew.
yeah, I may have to try it out this week.
Yeah.
I'll put that on my to-do list. Get some sleep. But no, I'd be curious to hear so your game Knowledge Games. The subtitle is "How Playing Games Can Solve Problems, Create Insight, and Make Change." And it's interesting too. I thought about this book you're writing about 100 games that can be used for educational purposes. Like, there's a lot of people that I think that's a big part of what we do at Love Thy Nerd is we want to highlight the value of things in nerd culture, including video games. And it's a big part of this podcast too. So we're bought in to that whole premise. But I think there's some people listening to this who maybe aren't, or maybe there's people who are listening to this who have people in their life who aren't, and they need to learn how to talk to those people and talk them down from the cliff of thinking that games are evil or a waste of time or destroying their relationships or something. So I'd be curious, what when you talk to people, give us some talking points when you talk to people who are like, you write about games and how they can help people solve problems and things. Like, aren't games just a waste of time? Aren't they ruining the brains of children?
Yeah.
I'd be curious to hear your response.
Yeah, well, I definitely hear that all the time. And, first of all, I am a parent. And when I tell other parents that I work with games, sometimes they look at me with horror. And, I am the person who is going to, change their kids into zombies of some kind. So I totally understand that perspective. And I hear it a lot. But I would be suspicious of anything that someone says was all completely amazing and good and great, or all completely bad and just, totally always awful.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, there are some things that we know are just not good in our lives. But when you have something that's as diverse and versatile as games, or really any media that's out there, there's so many different ways you can use it. There's so many different ways you can design with it. There's so many different kinds of people that are interacting with it. It's so complex.
Yeah.
We could never just make a blanket statement about an experience. It's like saying that all books are good or all books are bad, or that all language, every single thing that comes out of our mouths is good or bad. Right? There's so much versatility there that we could never make such a strong statement either way.
Yeah.
So what I usually say is that, just like anything, there's strengths and there's limitations. There's ways that we could use games in a constructive, pro-social way, just like we could also use them to highlight the cruelty and, underbelly of humanity.
Sure.
So, and both are there, both exist. And, I think that we just have to be okay with that. So I'm particularly interested in how we can use games to support pro-social behavior, like supporting empathy and compassion, care, ethical thinking, civic engagement. And you might wonder, well, what are some of those conditions under which we can do that? And there's so many. I mean, there's so many, and there's so many different ways that we can do that. But, one is that through games, possibly we could use role playing and have people take on different roles and try out different perspectives and understand perhaps other people's perspectives. We can have them interact with a system. A game is a system, a complex system. And through that system, we can, the game system, we can kind of push and pull on different variables. We can push on the boundaries of the game, and we can understand that system better in ways that perhaps we can reveal systemic biases or systemic issues that exist in our real world. Those are just like two examples, but there's so many others. I mean, you can use story and immersive worlds to understand what other people have gone through, similar to what a film might do, or even a television series.
Can you give us some examples of like games that shine in those two ways that you mentioned, or that you maybe taught with using?
Yeah, well, one of the games that I like to teach with, that I think shows compassion and perhaps helps people practice empathy, is called That Dragon Cancer. This is a game that it's an indie game. It was created by some folks, the Green family, who actually lost a child to cancer, and they created a game about what it was like to go through the cancer treatments, to grieve over their son who was dying of cancer, in remission from cancer, but then came back, and then losing him. So he was even part of the process of creating the game, and he actually died during the creation of the game. And so it's a very powerful game because it's so personal, and it shows such a authentic look at what it's like to lose a child, and also to be in a hospital and going through treatments, and just the trauma of that in and of itself is very difficult. And I use that game a lot in class, actually. So I teach a ethics and gaming class, and one thing I say about this game is, some students, it might be too much for them. It's actually so powerful, and it's so real and so raw that I say, if it's too much for you emotionally, then you do not have to participate. And every year there's always one student who it's just, maybe they lost a parent or a sibling to cancer, or they just have some connection to loss that it's just too uncomfortable for them.
I've had that
But
game.
for the rest of the students, and for me even, it helps us to connect with what it means to lose someone, and it's such a human thing, right? It's such to lose a person. That's part of being human. And one thing I tell them is that it helps me connect to them better, because it helps me to be more vulnerable in sharing that I've lost a child, and that I also spent months in the hospital with my other child. And while I did not have the same exact story that the Greens had with losing their child, the game shows a glimmer of that helps me to share the pain and of my own loss. And it's something that people don't really like to hear about. They don't like to talk about loss. But through the game, I think it's easier to talk about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, because as someone who's experienced similar type of loss, so would you say for you personally, it was beneficial for you? I mean, you obviously were able to get through it, and you even use it in your classroom. So was, as someone who's experienced a similar type of loss, how did the game sit with you? I'm interested in particular because we've had them on this podcast actually. Well, before this podcast was under a different name, and we interviewed them. We actually got to hang out with Ryan and Amy a few times. I would count them friends of ours. So anyway, but so sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I think that's, well, okay, so they made this game, right? And I think part of, perhaps for them, part of coming to terms with their grief was through expression of that grief through a game. And I think there's something about creation and sharing that creation with others that helps you come to terms with your own grief and feel more connected to other people. And I think the same can be said for me. I actually, one of the things you do when you're going up for tenure is that you get observed by different people. And in the class where I use That Dragon Cancer, I happen to be observed by my dean, who's my big boss at Marist. And she asked me, she said, given what you've gone through, how are you able to play this game? It's so, because she understood, because she knew what I had gone through. And and a lot of people might ask, like, well, how could you play it? Like, it's just too hard. And I said, no, actually, it's the opposite. It is hard, and I think it's hard for anyone to play the game. But on the other hand, it helps me feel like now other people understand a little more of what I went through,
Yeah.
and that makes me feel less alone.
Mm-hmm.
And that the not talking about it is what isolates you and makes you feel worse about it. At least for me. I mean, I like that there's media out there that can reflect parts of what I went through, so that other people out there can understand me better.
Yeah.
And I can share some part of me out there with others as well. That is to me what human compassion is all about.
It demystifies it, or like de-taboos it or something, for people.
Definitely. And I think that, that's why we share stories. We want people to understand what we've gone through and the steps that we've taken to get where we are. We have a drive to want to express and share and connect with others. And I think that's what media is about. It is about sharing information, and it is about trying to connect, but it's also about sharing those stories and trying to tell others, because we can't fully enter into someone else's world. We can't fully enter into someone else's life,
Yeah.
but through stories and through media, we can at least get a little bit of a glimpse into who they are and what kind of makes them tick.
Well, I think I'm sure this is kind of what you're saying too. I think with games specifically, beyond like movies or books, like games they give you that agency. So even more so, I think they can put you in the driver's seat, or in an more empathetic position than even like a movie or books could.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a different experience when you are enacting or performing part of that story, when you are making choices and decisions that relate to it and seeing the effect of those choices on the world that you inhabit. But again, it's another way. I don't think it's necessarily a better way. It could be a better way depending on the story or the connection that you're trying to express. But it's another way. It's another way of connecting to people. And through that connection, you can have all the unicorns and puppy dogs and rainbows of love and care. You can also have, the cruel, dark, evil underbelly of toxic culture online. So there's you have a spectrum of connection that could be quite antisocial or could be quite pro-social.
Yeah, and I think that's like you're hitting on, I think, what a lot of people are struggling with the industry today, because it can be super toxic. Like the games industry doesn't always have a great reputation. When you think about the way many video games depict women, for instance, or another example would be like what you mentioned with online toxicity being a pretty big problem in the industry. So I think like there's some people that see all that and just go like, well, I don't have anything to do with this. But I think from what I hear you saying, it sounds like maybe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you would say, well, you're missing out on the potential, though, that this medium carries with it for human expression and for telling true stories that will help us understand each other better. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'd be curious what keeps you going in this industry when it is like, it can feel like an oppressive industry, I think. But you keep going, work to investigate it and understand it and help other people understand it.
Yeah, it is difficult, and I think that most people who are not in the mainstream ideal of what a gamer or game player is supposed to be, the white male, heterosexual kind of myth of who someone's supposed to be. If you're not exactly that, if you're not, that person, that ideal, if you vary from that in any bit, you do feel like you are climbing up a very high mountain and there's just boulders rolling at you all the time. It's like being in a Super Mario game where you're just constantly getting
Right.
lava spit at you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're kind of ducking and you're jumping and you're moving around trying to escape it because the path is harder, and you start to question, like, do I belong in this
Yeah.
community? Because I am being told by everyone, whether they mean to or not, that I systemically do not belong here.
Yeah.
And it's difficult sometimes, but this is something I care about. It's something I believe in and I'm passionate about. So I guess that keeps me going. I've always loved gaming. I love gaming today because I get to do, like I said before, so many different things. I mean, games touch upon all areas of humanity. It touches on technology and science and humanities and how humans behave. And to me, that's interesting. That's, it's art, it's science, it's humanistic, and I love all of that. So to me, games are kind of a pinnacle of just every interdisciplinary connection that is possible. That keeps me going. That variety, that versatility, that diversity of the potential of all you can do with it and all you can write about it and all that you can teach about it. It's always changing. It's always evolving from the day I started at Marist in 2011 until today in 2019. It's completely changed, and it's going to keep changing. And I love that. I'm the kind of person who likes to be constantly growing and changing and evolving. So to me, that's exciting. But I do agree that it's a harder path. Like, I took the, when you have the two choices in a game, and you, like, should I take the, rainbows and sunshine path and there's no monsters,
Paragon or Renegade and Mass Effect,
with, like, brambles and vines and lots of things getting thrown at me. I took the brambles path. But that's more interesting to me. So it worked for me.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm really thankful that there's people out there in the world doing the kind of work that you're doing in games, because I do think, like, I just had a friend confess basically on Facebook that he's struggling with whether or not, he wants to continue working in the games industry and is probably going to get out of it and just kind of shared, like, hey, by the way, like, I've got tons of stories about like people who this industry has chewed up and spit out, And he worked for some big studios, and he also worked in, well, I shouldn't say more than that because people will start to guess who it is, but and I want to respect that. But yeah, I think there is a tendency among some people to just be overwhelmed by the things about it that are frustrating and that are oppressive. But we need people out there studying it and helping us think about it more carefully so that we can engage it more responsibly, and so that we can engage it in a way that's, like, for lack of a better word, like, life-giving to people rather than harmful. And so I sense that in you, like, this desire to help people get the most out of their time with the game. And that can only have a good impact. I mean, like, on the industry, not just on, like, gamers themselves, like, but also on the industry as a whole. Like, the type of work you're doing, it has the potential to help, like, publishers and studios do better work, which is really, like, an encouraging thought, I think.
Actually, it's even, I would agree with that, because I think that I'm trying to get people to get the most out of games, but hopefully the most out of life as well. But even more directly, I'm a fellow with the EDL, which is the Anti-Defamation League, this year, and we are working to try to get more directly to support game studios in creating these kinds of games that have maybe are supporting compassion and empathy and, thinking through things like bias and identity. This year I created a game jam guide. So what we did was we hosted a bunch of game jams all over the country. So everywhere from Austin to Atlanta to New York City and California and Seattle. And we we created a game jam which had the theme of identity. We worked with the Global Game Jam to help organize it. And I also did research on it. So I actually researched not only like looking at the games that were made at the game jam. By the way, do you know what a game jam is before I go further? For anyone out there who doesn't know what a game
You
jam is, it's
should,
kind of
yeah,
like
explain it. Yeah.
a hackathon is like this kind of intense period where you're creating something. With a game jam, you're creating a game, so you're kind of like not showering and not eating. I'm kidding. You're eating, you're showering, you're sleeping, but you are working like in this intense period, usually a weekend, where you're going from start to finish, creating a game, and there's usually a theme. And our theme for this game jam was identity. And I created a guide to support that as well, which is free and available and evidently going to be in the congressional record because it was brought up today, in fact, in some kind of congressional hearing. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, that's
And
really
I
cool.
could share with you the link to that guide soon after this podcast. But what I did was I also researched not only the games that were created, but I researched through the game jam. So working on the design practice itself, does that support perspective taking and help people come to terms more with their identity and express and explore their identities? And it's just been really exciting because what we're trying to do now is, as a result, thinking about how do we translate that game jam into something that is more of like a module or like an event that can take place at a game studio. So in the game studios can have us come in and help support doing, maybe part of it is identity exploration exercises and maybe some anti-bias work, but through the actual design of a game that the anti-bias work is integrated into that. So it becomes this anti-bias event, but also a game jam. And the hope is that it helps everyone feel more included and feel more like they belong, but it also hopefully will help even those people who maybe are like, oh, anti-bias events, that sounds really boring, or I don't want to do that, or that sounds stupid. That's, I don't want to be part of that. But like through the game design process, maybe, they will start to engage with those kinds of, those kinds of concepts and those kinds of just, exercises, and they'll get more involved in it. So that's my hope. I mean, we'll see how it turns out, but so far it's been exciting and really rewarding.
I just love like hearing just the passion and care I think that you're taking in all this stuff. Like it just comes through so clearly. I mean, I've never met you before today, and I really appreciate that about you. And I think one of the things that we try to do or hope to do when we have people on is like get at where that came from or like where that started. So like where did you grow up? Like what was that like? Yeah.
Wow, I don't know. I think that in general, if you met me, I come across as like a very low key, quiet kind of person. But if you get me talking about something that I am passionate about, I am super enthusiastic
Sure.
and very expressive about it. So I think that I kind of have those two different sides to me, where I do like to meet people and listen and kind of take in all of that is around me, but then I also will put out the excitement and passion that I've drawn from others. But where did I grow up? I grew up on Long Island, which is in New York State.
Yeah.
Specifically, I grew up in the Stony Brook, Setauket area, close to SUNY Stony Brook, for those who are familiar with it, as well as close to Port Jefferson, which is kind of like a tourist hotspot. Really had a good childhood with kind of an amazing public school that I went to, which was Ward Melville High School. It had this
Shout out.
amazing science program in it. At the time, was called West Prep. I don't know if they have it still, but it was based on the Westinghouse competition, which is now Regeneron. It's the science talent search competition. And I did that when I was in high school, and I was a semifinalist, and it was amazing. It was one of the best moments of my life.
That's cool.
working in a lab. So I got to actually work in a science lab when I was in high school, and that was awesome. I worked at SUNY Stony Brook, and I also worked at Brookhaven National Lab, and it was I just got to do these things that were just amazing for a high school student to really, I was basically acting like a postdoc, but as a high school student, and I got to do real world science, and it's been, work on these projects that were, everything from like building bridges to creating mouse traps to working on egg drops. And I got to work on these very creative science projects that were just super exciting through this West Prep program. And I think that I just really lucked out that I had that kind of community, had that kind of ability to express my passions in all different ways in my high school.
When did how did games become a part of that? Because I think what you're sharing like that, okay, we get that the sort of science research investigative side, but when did games become a part of that? Like, was that from a young age you're playing games, or when did that kind of enter into it?
I mean, the thing is, like, I've always been playing games. I got an Atari 2600 from my uncle when I was a kid, and we had the Nintendo. I mean, I remember getting that Nintendo for one of the holidays and just being just so excited. And that's what I did as a kid. I didn't know that girls weren't supposed to play games. Like, that was never expressed. No one talked about that. So I just played games with my friends or with my brother, or we just all, when I went to a sleepover, we all played games. Like, that's what we did. We played video games, we played board games. Whenever my grandparents would come over, I would stay up late, past midnight playing Rummikub with my grandmother. So like that's what we did. Like we would sit around the Apple IIe and play Maniac Mansion. Like we would just play games.
That's a great game.
We were just always there. So it never dawned on me until I was in my 20s and people were like, "Oh, you play games? Like, I can't believe you play games." I'm like, "What?" It just, no one thought that girls weren't supposed to play games. That became like a thing all of a sudden 20 years ago. And when I was a kid, almost 40 years ago, we all just played games. So, and you know what? It's exciting because I started with Super Mario Brothers. Well, I started with Atari, right? So Pac-Man and Pitfall. I remember loving Pitfall, but then getting into Super Mario Brothers, and now right before I was on the podcast with you, my son and I were playing Super Mario Brothers. So,
nice.
It's continued there, and they love Pac-Man too. I don't know. It's something about these games that they just
Do you play them on the Nintendo, like the original Nintendo versions of those games?
I did get one of those special
NES Classic.
Yeah, one of those classics. So we could do the original, but they've been liking playing on the Wii because we get to play at the same time.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so I'm like, I gotta get a Switch now so we can really
You do got to get a Switch because they're awesome.
But I'm started got them on the Wii because that seems about right for them. They're still they're still like, how do I jump?
I feel like I need to introduce those games to my kids because it's a lot like just jumping into the type of games that come out these days. Like even playing Super Mario Odyssey. Like there's just a lot more to that game.
Oh yeah.
In terms of controls and stuff,
totally.
than playing the original Super Mario. And it's like, we shouldn't expect kids to get it, right away. I should probably pare down what I play with my kids and introduce them.
Don't they have that simple mode in Super Mario Odyssey? Like you can enable like a simplified mode or something.
Yeah. My daughter's messed around with that a little bit.
Yeah.
We need to try it again, probably. See how it goes. But.
So Karen, growing up, one of the things we like to ask people is about religion. Like, was that a part of growing up? Because I think that's something for a lot of people. It kind of informs the way that they sort of develop and what they do with the rest of their life. Like, was that a part of your upbringing at all? Religion?
Well, definitely culturally. My family is not religious, but we are Jewish and we are culturally Jewish. So that, I did go to Hebrew school and I might be the only one who enjoyed going to Hebrew school.
What is that for people who aren't familiar with Hebrew school? What does that mean? Like, what did you do?
Yeah, so that's a great question. What did I do? I know I had to go 3 days a week, and that's quite a bit, 3 days a week. beyond just going to regular school.
Yeah.
Go to the,
Oh, okay, so this is in addition to
yeah, it was
your
totally
public
in
school and all
addition.
that.
So I would go to public school, normal, everyday public school. I'd come home, and then we'd all carpool over to the synagogue. And basically, it was like 2 hours, or maybe like an hour and a half. Like, let's say 4:30 to 6:30. I don't remember the exact times, but that would be like Monday and Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
on Sundays, we'd go in the mornings and basically do like a mini service.
Okay.
I know almost nothing based on that, though. We learned the Hebrew language,
Yeah.
and we learned about the holidays. But the problem is they taught us like the biblical Hebrew, not
Right.
conversational Hebrew. If they had taught us conversational Hebrew, maybe we would know some of it, and that would actually be kind of cool and useful. But they just
Yeah.
taught us like how to read like scripture or not scripture. I
Right.
don't even know, like the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were trying to prepare us to be able to do, to lead our own service during Shabbat.
Yeah.
Now, what was interesting is that when I was going to Hebrew school, and I went to a conservative Hebrew school, even though there's different levels of being Jewish, levels, like different
Sure.
denominations.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to compare it to any other religion because I just don't know enough about the others. But there's like Reform, or there's conservative, there's Orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
Orthodox tends to be the most like adhering to like religious law. I'm not doing this justice because I really
Like
don't
kosher food laws and things like
understanding. But
that.
conservatives kind of like the Goldilocks. It's like not too light, but like not too heavy. It's like just right.
Yeah.
I
Just
don't know,
right.
but it's in the middle. By the way, I'm not religious at all, so it's just like some people
Sure.
might be on the more religious side, but maybe not. Anyway, the rabbi at the time, and the rabbi is kind of like the religious leader, didn't let women do Shabbat, lead any Shabbat services on Saturdays for their bat mitzvah. And bat mitzvah is kind of like this, I don't know how to put it, like a celebration of becoming an adult.
Yeah,
that
like
happens
coming of
Yeah.
age kind of thing.
like traditionally, like only men were allowed to do that, but then women were allowed. And I was to become a bat mitzvah, and they wouldn't let me do the service on a Saturday. And my parents really did not want to have a Friday night service because then that means like you're having your party afterward, and it goes like really late, like midnight. And they didn't want that. They wanted a daytime party.
Yeah.
So what I did,
For convenience reasons.
mostly for convenience, yeah, but I think they were kind of like, why can't women have it on Saturday? That's like ridiculous.
Oh, right. Sure. Yeah.
So on Sunday, I did actually a special service, which was on Sunday, a Sunday service. And for that, you don't do a half Torah. It's like twice a year type of thing. I couldn't even tell you. I knew more about it when I was 13 than I do now. Basically, it's something to do with like the new moon. And anyway, it was a special Sunday service. I basically had to lead all of the songs for the service. And part of doing a Sunday service is that you also give a speech. And in my speech, I basically said, why aren't women allowed to have to lead the services on Saturday?
Oh,
so
dang.
I think even then I was starting to think about like social justice and fairness and equality and equity. And then, I remember people still talk about that speech,
Wow.
20 years later, like, wow, like
That's cool.
were saying things that should have been said to the rabbi. And, he wasn't too happy about it.
Right.
I was going to ask if you got any feedback from
He wasn't
the rabbi.
happy about it because I
Yeah.
was really criticizing his speech for that. He was conservative, but more on the Orthodox side. And he ended up actually leaving the synagogue not long after that. And they actually changed it not long after that. So now women can have Saturday services.
So you were like,
it was because of my speech, but maybe that was like the final.
it can't have hurt.
Yeah, can't have hurt.
It sounds like.
Well, it depends on whose
Ev-
perspective, I guess. But in
Yeah.
our perspective, it
But,
didn't hurt.
I mean, the thing about being Jewish is like there is this idea of tikkun olam, which is like repair the world, and you always want to kind of leave the world a better place. And I think
Tikkun olam? Is that what you said?
Yeah, tikkun olam. It's like you want to leave the world a better place, and you want to repair it and
Yeah.
try to make it a better world. And I think that's something that is, always driven me. My dad did run for a while. He was a professor and also administrator at a college, but he also ran a Holocaust museum and diversity Center for Human Understanding on Long Island. And I think that also, that kind of cultural understanding and wanting to connect people from all different religions and all different cultural backgrounds and different races and different, that's always been something that has been important to me, and it's driven my work, and kind of wanting to kind of marry the interest in social justice and education with my interest in creativity and technology and science. To me, this really kind of brings together so many different areas that I'm interested in, and that is what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so it's interesting to me because you said you're not religious now anymore, but it sounds like that some of the ideas of your religious upbringing, like the Tikkun Olam and things like that, certainly have impacted your perspective and how you engage the world of games and things. And that's cool. That's really cool. Do you sense that? Do you sense that about yourself, or I don't know what I know your perspective's changed now, so I want to honor that.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know what part of you came from what.
Sure.
I think that people are always evolving and always trying to grow in different ways, and you end up being inspired by your family and your upbringing, and also to some extent your religion. But it's also the values that my parents shared with me, are those from their religion, or is it just culturally passed along? Or, I know that ethics and caring about others and compassion and empathy, those are values that are really strong, important to my parents and important to me. So I think that, I don't know where that came from, but it's, it's always been part of our family. But also on the flip side, my parents are such questioners, and they're always they're so curious, and they're so much trying to kind of understand the world in that way. For example, when I write a book, or if I working on a project, they'll ask me harder questions than anyone else. When I went for when I was at MIT and I went for my thesis, I had to present my thesis, or do my dissertation at Columbia, and I had to give a presentation and get questioned during it. And the questions I got from my parents were so much more challenging, but also prepared me for any other questions I could possibly get. So, I think the idea of questioning is kind of a Jewish kind of way of being in the world, and even questioning your own faith and questioning your own yourself and your own religion is part of is a quote unquote Jewish thing. Now, could it be part of other religions? Yes, of course. And could empathy and caring about others be part of other religions? Yeah. So I don't know if it's being Jewish, or it's just it's who we happen to be.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I know you said you got to get going. You have a limited amount of time today, so I want to respect that. But thanks so much for coming on the podcast. And where can people find you online? What's the best way to follow the work that you're doing?
Well, probably the best way is on Twitter, and my Twitter name is Dr. Gamer Mom. So that's Dr. Gamer Mom. I kind of just took the three areas that are me and kind of mushed them together into a Twitter handle. Yeah.
If I had a if I had a PhD, that's the word. I would go after Dr. Gamer Dad right now. So, but I don't, so I can't. But I think it's a pretty great Twitter handle. So
thanks.
Yeah. And then so that's the best place to kind of follow the work you're doing. And I know you said you have a book coming out pretty soon. You want to tell us the name of that one again?
Yeah, so there's a few books. One is Learning, Education, and Games, 100 Games to Use in the Classroom, and that will be out probably this summer through ETC Press. And then I have another book coming out that will be on using games to teach ethics and civics, and I'm hoping that will be out just in time for the 2020 elections in the United States.
Oh yeah, great. So you'll get us all fixed
Yes,
in that
please.
regard. No,
It's up to you.
that's awesome. Would definitely encourage people to go check out your work and go read your books. I would love to have you on again. There are so many questions I wanted to ask you about ethics and game design.
Yeah.
I know you've thought a lot about that subject, so maybe we'll have you on again and do some kind of like roundtable discussion about that subject. So yeah. Anyway, thanks so much, Karen. This was awesome.
Thank you. This was really great.
Yeah. And you can follow us on Twitter, Love Thy Nerd. I'm on Twitter, JudithDixon82. If you want to follow Love Thy Nerd on any of the social medias, just search for Love Thy Nerd. Also, go ahead and ask to join the Love Thy Nerd community on Facebook. Just search for Love Thy Nerd community on Facebook. Once we make sure you're not a robot, we'll let you in, and you can nerd out about nerdy stuff with other nerds. And that's about it for us. We have a whole podcast network, so go check out our other podcasts, Free Play and The Pull List. And go rate and review those and tell your friends about them. So that's it for us. Thanks again for listening to Humans of Gaming. We'll see you next time.